Welcome back to another episode of Play by Play presented by Win or Lose Sports Network. This is episode number 22, and this is the Monday or Tuesday, actually, after WrestleMania, the Tuesday after the men's Final Four, and the Tuesday after the women's Final Four. And a lot of conversation has been had over the last few days, especially after South Carolina winning the women's tournament, is the GOAT conversation. And this is a conversation that I'm to be honest, a conversation that I'm really tired of people having, because I never had these conversations. I never have these conversations because the GOAT conversations aren't real. The GOAT conversations that people have aren't real because most of the people who have these conversations aren't real sports fans or aren't real followers of sports. So now people are saying that Dawn Staley is the GOAT when it comes to college women's basketball. And I mean, I give her flowers. She is one of the best coaches to ever coach college women's basketball. She's one of the best point guards to ever play in the WNBA, one of the greatest coaches in any sport. The problem I have with the GOAT conversation when it comes to her is she's won 2 or 3 championships. When you have people who's won in double digits, and as great as she is, we can't have that conversation yet. You can't have that conversation saying that she is the greatest women's basketball coach of all time. I mean, she is great at what she does. Yes. She's a great motivator. She's a great teacher. When it comes to winning, and that is where the GOAT conversation comes, when it comes to winning. And that is the GOAT conversation in any sport. Women's basketball, men's basketball, football. When you talk about the greatest of all time, you have to look at a certain type of player or certain players. Tom Brady in the NFL played for 20 years. Half of those years, he's went to a Super Bowl and won 7 of those Super Bowls. So that's great. That is the greatest feat that anybody in that sport has ever accomplished. As a quarterback, he took his team, led his team to winning 7 Super Bowls and played 20 years. Half of those years, he accomplished the feat of going to a Super Bowl. When it comes to basketball, that conversation to me, when it comes to pro basketball, NBA, that conversation to me is a lost cause, because there's eras when it comes to basketball. There's different types of play when it comes to different eras in basketball. When you talk about the early days of Bill Russell, who won 11 championships, 8 straight, the competition level was different. Yeah, he dominated the game, and I love Bill Russell. I'm a Celtics fan. But I can't call him the greatest basketball player of all time. I can't call Kareem the greatest basketball player of all time, because in his era, the big man dominated the game. So he was 7'3" and had a shot that nobody could stop, scored over 38,000 points. And then we have Michael Jordan, who won 6 titles, multiple MVPs, All-Star selections, All-Pro, All-Defensive Player of the Year. Probably one of the greatest scorers of all time. And arguably the greatest player of all time. The conversation gets screwed or misconstrued when we talk about LeBron James, because people don't understand what LeBron has accomplished as a player. Most Jordan fans are going to say, well, LeBron went to the finals 10 times, only won 4. Jordan went to the finals 6 times and won 6. But LeBron James went to more finals. LeBron James had to get help to win championships. Jordan had help. He had Scottie. He had Horace Grant. He had Dennis Rodman. But that's the way teams were built back then. That's the way the Lakers were built back then when you had James Worthy, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Magic Johnson on the team, and Byron Scott. They were built to last and have multiple all-stars, multiple superstars on their team. Jordan had multiple superstars on his teams. Isaiah Thomas had him and Joe Dumars and Bill Laimbeer and Dennis Rodman on their team. So they had multiple all-stars, multiple superstars on these teams. So now when LeBron does it, he does it out publicly, say, I want this guy on my team, and they go out and win. Now it's a problem because he's doing it out in public and out blatantly saying, I want to play with these guys. The things that LeBron has accomplished as a player in the NBA on the floor, I'm not talking about off the floor. That's a different conversation. On the floor, LeBron, even though he played more years than Jordan, more years than Bill Russell, just as many years as Kareem, the way LeBron approaches the game and his mentality of the game, his IQ on the floor, is above any other player that I've ever seen. And I've seen thousands of players, thousands of basketball players. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan are on a different level when it comes to scoring the basketball. There's no players on this earth, I don't think, will ever come to the point to where they are just as great as a scorer as Kobe Bryant. There's no players on this earth that I think that will be as dominant as a player as Michael Jordan. But I don't think there's a player that's ever played the game of basketball on any level that has had the IQ, the knowledge of the game, the history of the game, and the awareness on the floor to will his team to win and become one of the best scorers in the NBA. And that was not his purpose. His purpose was to win basketball games. When I'm talking about LeBron James, I'm not a Lakers fan. I'm not a LeBron fan, but I'm a basketball fan. I grew up as a Bulls fan and a Celtics fan. Well, let's just say Jordan fan and a Celtics fan. So this is not a biased conversation, but I don't think we can separate, I don't think we can combine the Jordan era, the LeBron era, the Bill Russell and the Kareem era and say one of these guys, one of these 4 guys, yeah, I'm gonna throw Kobe in there too and Magic. I don't think none of these 5 or 6 guys is one of the greatest out of all of these players. I don't think we can have that conversation. I don't think that's real. Because in Jordan's era, to be honest, there's a limited amount of players that can do what he can do. There's a limited amount of players that can dominate a game like Jordan could dominate a game. Now, when you look at it, you got people like LeBron, you got people like Steph Curry, you got people like James Harden, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jason Tatum, Dame Lillard, players, Kevin Durant, players that can dominate the game, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, players that can dominate the game, and you were sitting there watching in awe of what they're doing on the floor. You only had a few of those players back in the 90s. You only had a couple of those players back in the 80s. You only had 1 or 2 of those players back in the 60s and 70s. So to compare eras and say who is the greatest of all time can't be done because you can only choose one. And if you go by skill set, if you can go by and without winning championships, throw the championships out the window. And you go by skill set, you will say, okay, Kobe can score, Kobe can play defense, Kobe can lock down on defense, Kobe can shoot the ball from anywhere on the floor, Kobe can take the ball to the hole, and you can't stop him because he has probably the best footwork ever in NBA history, and he can post you up. If you go by that, you will say Kobe is the best player I've ever seen. I will say Kobe is the best player I've ever seen. He's the greatest skilled player of all time. Now, when you're talking about the impact of the game, you will say Michael Jordan probably had the greatest impact when he came in the league, because when you go back and look at the video, the history of when he got drafted, when he was going to get drafted, even his GM, Rod Thorne, who drafted Michael Jordan, said, we're not going to draft a 6'6" guy and expect him to come in and dominate the game and win his championships, because that's not what it was back then. It was a big man dominated game. You had people like Mark Eaton said, he's only 6'6". He's not going to come in and dominate the game. And, it's a big man's world. Clyde Frazier said the same thing. He's not going to come in and dominate the game. He's only 6'6". But Michael Jordan, being the determined player that nobody expected him to be, came in and dominated the game, led the league in scoring out on almost every year. Now, when you look at LeBron, who is a player that is not just his scoring that makes people brag about him or cheer for him. It's the way he approaches the game, the knowledge of the game, his smartness on the floor, the way he gets his teammates involved, the way that he wills his team to win. Michael Jordan and LeBron are two different personalities. LeBron is a people-friendly, I'm going to invite you in and let's go for a ride type of guy. And Jordan is, if you're not on this train, well, you're going to get left type of guy. So they approached the game two different ways. Michael Jordan was a selfish player, quote unquote, when he came into the league. LeBron James was a pass first guy. They approached the game different. They won in different eras. They had different types of teammates, different types of coaches. Of course, Jordan had probably arguably one of the greatest coaches of all time because of the 11 championships between two different franchises. And LeBron struggled with different coaches in Cleveland and had one of the best coaches in Miami and Eric Spoelstra with Pat Riley behind that. In LA, it's the same way that it was in Cleveland, just different types of coaches. So the argument of the greatest of all time, it's a lost cause. It's a lost cause in pro basketball, college basketball, college women's basketball. Even though I love Dawn Staley and what she's doing with South Carolina, you got to look at Geno and UConn and the championships that he's won. Pat Summitt in Tennessee, when she won the championship. When you talk about women's players in college, Caitlin Clark cannot be the greatest of all time. When you have players like multiple championships and multiple players of the year, Breanna Stewart, Cheryl Miller, Candace, and Diana Taurasi, you got a level of competition or a level of play that they dominated across the board and won multiple championships. Caitlin Clark didn't win any, even though she's probably the most impactful player of our era, of this era right now, when it comes to college women's basketball, because of how the media is clamoring over the way she plays. But we've seen this before. We've seen this in Steph Curry, his impact in the NBA when he first came to the NBA. Because in college, you saw him in that Final Four, but we didn't see that before because we didn't see Davidson play on TV. But once he got to the NBA, everyone saw it. So now it's like, whoa, we've never seen anything like this before. But Caitlin Clark, we've seen this before. We've seen this in men's game. So this is the first time we've seen this in the women's game. I'm not taking anything away from Caitlin Clark or any other player. I just think that GOAT conversation needs to go away for now, especially when you talk about players that are still playing the game. There are eras, there are times that have changed. The game has changed in multiple different sports. So I just think that this conversation needs to take a sideline, especially for those who really don't know the sport, the ones who just now started watching college women's basketball or college or women's pro basketball, WNBA. So we can have this conversation over and over again, but to me, it's pointless in any sport unless it's an individual sport, one-on-one sport, where you talk about golf or tennis. Then we could talk about the greatest of all time, because you're not involving other factors like teammates and coaches involved. You talk about me against you or me against myself. So that is my rant for this episode of Play by Play. Tune in for more. Make sure you subscribe and like on YouTube at Win or Lose Show. That's on any social media. We're at Win or Lose Show. Make sure you follow us and download on anywhere podcasts are available: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you next time on Play by Play.